I don't know, I think I've learned a lot of lessons about how to make things go fast.
It was challenging for SpaceX engineers to finally have the Starship ready for a relaunch, as most of the stacking was done by cranes, not the Mechazilla tower. It looks like SpaceX will be using cranes to assemble the Starship on the launch pad and launch them into space. When the ship returns from space, it'll submerge towards the Mechazilla catcher and hang itself on the catcher. That is when the reusability process will be initiated. So, cranes will be handling the reassembling and stacking until another alternative has been improvised. In today's video, we will discuss more about how SpaceX stacks the 102-meter tall Starship on the launch pad and begin installing the Raptor 2 engine one after another. SpaceX has put together both stages of its next-generation Starship rocket for the first time in more than 6 months. This makes it the largest and most powerful launch vehicle ever assembled. It won't be the first time the company stacks a Starship's full size. SpaceX has done 3 other full stack demonstrations of the Starship. The first was in August 2021, and the other 2 were in February and March 2022. But earlier this year, SpaceX decided to give up on the Starship upper stage and Super Heavy booster prototypes, which had been used in all 3 of the previous tests, and were once thought to be a good choice for the rocket's first attempt to launch into orbit. Around June 2022, Booster 4 and Ship 20 were sent to a retirement yard. By that time, SpaceX had already started testing the new favorites, Super Heavy Booster 7 and Starship 24, for the orbital launch of Starship, almost exactly 6 months after that busy testing period began. Both prototypes recently reached a point where SpaceX felt confident enough in their progress to combine them for the most difficult phase of Starship testing, stacking the Ship 24 and Booster. After a failed attempt to launch Starship before dawn on October 11th, technicians from SpaceX fixed some mysterious problems with key infrastructure at Starship's first almost finished launch pad in Boca Chica, Texas. As part of a risky gamble made by CEO Elon Musk, SpaceX has taken the legs off all of its recent Starship and Super Heavy prototypes in the hopes that the skyscraper-sized Mechazilla tower will catch the Starship in midair. The company has also built a 145-meter tall launch tower and put 3 huge robotic arms on it. 2 of these arms are the same and are connected to each other to make a claw that could one day close around hovering rockets or catch, so landing legs aren't needed. A third, simpler arm swings in and out to connect the upper stage of Starship to the power, propellant, and gas supplies on the launch pad. The chopsticks, as they are called, also help put together Starship rockets at the launch pad, which is an even more important job. Due to their strong connection to a tower whose base is sunk deep into the Boca Chica wetlands and the fact that they don't have a hook or jig and instead have big arms, they are much less affected by wind than the huge crane that would be needed to stack Starship on top of Super Heavy. Storms and high winds often happen in this area because it is close to the Gulf of Mexico. On the 3rd try, SpaceX had better luck and was able to move the arms under Ship 24. This was around noon on October 11th. The Starship was then slowly lifted about 80 meters off the ground, moved to Booster 7, and put on top of the 69-meter tall first stage. It weighed 100 tons and was about 9 meters wide and 50 meters tall, about 165 feet. After about 2 more hours of adjusting their positions with robots, the 2 stages of the Starship were finally joined. With Ship 24's arms still attached, SpaceX workers could get close to the rocket and get ready to connect Starship to the swing arm's quick disconnect umbilical. The cryogenic refueling stage must put a lot of stress on the steel in the rockets, so there must be a theoretical limit to how many times a booster can be used. Or the alloy used is especially strong for this reason. If you don't know what cryogenic refueling means, here's a good way to think about it. The almighty cryogenic pressure test is done to make sure that a spaceship can handle the high pressures and very low temperatures that happen in space. This is done by filling the Starship with liquid nitrogen, which has a temperature of 196 degrees Celsius or 320 degF, and mimics what it would be like to be in space. And after pressurizing the Starship propellant tank at this temperature, and no leakage is noticed, what follows next is the wet dress rehearsal. But again, what does a wet dress rehearsal look like, and what does it mean? Here's a guide. It's like a dress rehearsal in the theater or a full run-through of the show before opening night with all the costumes, makeup, tech, and stage management. Merriam-Webster Dictionary says a dress rehearsal is also called a dry run. Now, to make it more useful from a technical standpoint, the wet dress rehearsal simulates every step of a rocket launch without the rocket leaving the pad. A dry run, if you will call it that. But filling the rocket's propellant tanks, restarting the countdown clock, and emptying the tanks makes the practice launch countdown a wet dress rehearsal. This is done by continuous practice, and practice, until finally the desired goal is seen to happen. NASA teams also did a wet dress rehearsal on the Artemis I rocket to check for leaks and a robust practice countdown on June 20th of this year, during which the Artemis I launch vehicle was filled with fuel and then later drained of the fuel to test the rocket's timing and mechanisms. Since June 6th, the Artemis I stack has been standing at Pad 39B. Before that, it was inside the vehicle assembly building at Kennedy Space Center for more than a month. So, the company's first wet dress rehearsal for Artemis I was at the start of April this year. Over several days, NASA engineers tried to fuel the rocket 3 times, but failed. Mechanical problems and leaks found during cryogenic fuel transfer meant that April's wet dress rehearsal had to be canceled, and SLS had to be rolled back to the VAB to be repaired. Hence, you have to know that no rocket manufactured can be fully stacked and launched without performing the wet dress rehearsal process to check for leakage and all other possible faults. So bear in mind that all rocket companies do this. Suppose the wet dress rehearsal for the fully stacked S-24 and B-7 goes as planned. In that case, SpaceX will try to start all 33 Raptor engines on Super Heavy B-7 simultaneously. If this works, Super Heavy B-7 will almost certainly be the most powerful liquid rocket ever tested. Even if none of the 33 engines ever reach more than 60% of their maximum thrust of 230 tons, they will probably beat the record of 45 tons at sea level set by the Soviet N-1 rocket. It would also be the first time all of the rocket engines on one vehicle were turned on simultaneously. SpaceX will push the limits several ways, and success is no longer a given. It needs to be clarified if SpaceX will try a full wet dress rehearsal or a 33-engine static fire immediately. Based on how Ship 24 and Booster 7 have been tested in the past, it would be out of the ordinary for the company not to do smaller tests in between the big ones. Assuming that WDR testing goes well, SpaceX will probably try at least 1 or more interim static fires with fewer than 33 engines before trying the first full test. Suppose both milestones, a full WDR and a 33-engine static fire, go off without a hitch. In that case, SpaceX could prepare for Starship's first attempt to launch into orbit without taking the rocket apart. If some problems come up and need to be fixed, which is more likely, the path will be longer, but they should still try to launch into orbit late this year or early next. Regarding throwing away reusability, it looks like it will be put off until the next group of Starships pass over possible malfunctioning. People talked about changing the shape, removing the front flaps, and putting in hard spots for chopsticks. But would those things actually work? Maybe those changes would be too hard to make in the current batch of good Starships, so they decided to get rid of them and replace them with Starlings instead. At least some of the cost will be saved. Most people believe Elon's goal of owning a planet in space by a human from Earth is impossible. Many think humans will never go to space because we can't get past the firmament. The Book of Enoch says that the Earth doesn't move, and this is true. The planets, stars, orbits, and galaxies are in the sky. They are heaven's people. We're not going to fly to a rock called Mars because it's a star. Do you think flying the rocket into many will only end in Elon's imagination, just like most people think? Believe it or not, SpaceX has announced its first static fire lifting 300 tons of Raptor engines that will change space race and make this a real thing. Click on the video to know more.